Hello out there. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Stacey Sanderson, and I am a psychotherapist, a coach, an author, and just thinking about and going through probably a lot of the same things that many of you are. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So today is Monday, May 12th, and it is the day after Mother's Day. And so I do hope that for those of you who celebrate, that you had a lovely day. And for those of you who, like me, really don't like Mother's Day, hang out with me here a little bit now and we'll talk about that. Don't get me wrong. I have a lovely husband and two beautiful adult children, and they really made the day special, and it was lovely to spend time with them. So I'll just clarify that first. I am not necessarily going to be focusing solely on Mother's Day by any means, but on the topic of not only having a mother with narcissistic personality disorder, but perhaps one who is more emotionally immature, or as we commonly use that term, toxic. And I like the term toxic because it, as the term implies, what's going on with this person influences the entire environment around it, right? So people who are toxic because of their own pain and defense mechanisms and their behavior and their emotional energy, it influences the environment around them. So I wanted to just explain that a little bit. There is a spectrum of narcissism, from healthy narcissism to unhealthy narcissism. And on the far end, of course, it is narcissistic personality disorder, as well as sociopathy, psychopathy on the far end of that spectrum. And I will be doing a formal transformational workshop on the topic of narcissism and the mother wound tomorrow. But this is a slightly different slant on the topic, to be a little bit more specific about narcissistic mothers. There was an explosion of this probably in the last 10 years, and most definitely in the advent of people being able to research this and find validation for what they were going through. So those two things go together. I think that were you to look at the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual information about narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder, it would be very tricky to be able to fit the persona of your mother into that diagnostic criteria. And so it isn't intended for that purpose anyway. So if you do have a mother with NPD, my heart goes out to you. But even that exists on a spectrum of the severity of those traits. And so I still defer back to the idea that NPD is a mental health condition, and it influences people's functioning and relationships. So there's an aspect of impairment in that person's life. So even if they're able to, achieve a certain amount of professional or social success, it is often undermined by the character pathology and the way that they relate to people and all of those other issues. The number one relevant aspect of this character disorder is a lack of empathy. Um, the inability to take someone else's perspective and anything going on in an exchange with them is about them. So that's number one. It's an impairment. It's a neurobiological impairment. It's not a choice. It's something that is very difficult to change. I think that many people who are narcissistic can get to a level of cognitive empathy, so being able to use their intellect, but genuine, real, heartfelt, heart-centered empathy is not something they have capacity for. And it can be quite shocking at times. And it's a trauma response to keep looking for it, even though it's not there. So the second important thing to remember is that they need a lot of supply, self-esteem supply, ego supply, ego stabilization. Stabilization of the sense of self comes from other people. So imagine what that's like. If you are their child, if you are their child, you are the number one source of their supply. So what goes along with that is narcissists have fantasies of idealized love, that perfect twin for themselves, that perfect person to mirror, their specialness back to them. And that can be one of their own children, unless somehow that gets challenged or changed. And then it may shift to a grandchild or to another child. And I have had hundreds of conversations with people where a narcissistic mother has tried to alienate them from one or more of their children. That's probably its own topic. It's a tough one to talk about for sure. But I am going through this, laundry list of traits. So again, a child can be part of that idealized love, most definitely the golden child, and I have another post about that here on YouTube if you wanted to take a closer look at that. There is a lot of number 4, I think, is where we're at. These are people who are very, very, very emotionally dysregulated, and they may and very likely have tried to manage that with some form of addiction. So that could be alcohol, drugs, shopping, gambling. Many, many, many narcissists I've met are addicted to TV. They really lose themselves in the characters and in the drama and in the plot. And I think at times they even identify with the people that they see on TV. I'm pretty sure I wrote about that in my book. And they have, in keeping with what I just said, number 6, I think that's where we're at, they have delusions of grandeur. Now, this is on a spectrum. This can be quite profound, or this can be much more covert, but they definitely, and I believe this is a form of dissociation, right? As children, things were too painful, so they retreat into this more idealized, grandiose version of themselves that can withstand that, and that feels like a safe place. And that may be then where the psyche resides for the rest of their life. Number 7, and it ties into what I just said, they swing from grandiosity to despair, right? So this appears in their mood, right? They're either on the top of the world or they're feeling very defeated, and that you're not going to hear them say that. That's going to come out more as irritability or low mood, and it can anchor itself into actually being a clinical depression. I'm just working through the list here. I'm sure that I am missing something. I think narcissistic parents project their own needs onto their children. I'm going to stop listing the diagnostic criteria and just launch into a little bit more of relevant content. They can be highly, highly, highly competitive, and they need to feel okay by feeling better than. In some ways, that is listed in the official diagnostic criteria, but it doesn't feel good if you, as the child, are the objectification of that comparing and competing dynamic. Um, Narcissists struggle with boundaries. Narcissistic mothers have very, very poor boundaries with their children to the point of codependence or enmeshment. So it's not at all unusual for a narcissistic mother to be very enmeshed with one or two children. I would say this, and this is coming from my own experience with this, they feed off of both your accomplishments and the things that aren't going well in your life. They want to hear both. They have pathological envy. This is on a spectrum of really envy is about wanting what someone else has, right? But they will have this with their children, particularly their daughters, right? There is this cycle of envy and competing and comparing. They can be very, very manipulative. They like to be in the center of things in their families. They are deeply, deeply uncomfortable when they are not the center of attention. That would be number 9 in the diagnostic criteria. But I want to take a closer look at that because where this plays out a lot is around special occasions. So we just had Mother's Day and it's supposed to be their day. But if it isn't, they can make things very difficult. So this happens, of course, at your major high holidays. This could happen around birthdays. This could happen around a myriad of different things. So there's that need to be the center of attention means they take up all the oxygen in the room. If there is a family gathering, they need to be the center of it. If if you're a teenager and you've got friends over, she's the one coming out kind of dressed inappropriately, needing to be with the younger crowd. Um, I I'm sitting here recollecting the number of times I've heard that. Um, Narcissistic mothers are often they have a victim archetype, a strong victim archetype. So no matter what you're going through, it can't possibly be as bad as what she has gone through. They they can again be on that spectrum of being very vulnerable or covert. I don't like that word. Anyone who listens to me knows I'm not a fan of that word. Or they can be more grandiose. I talk about this a lot, and I have met a lot of people who are highly narcissistic, and in my experience, they can swing from one extreme to the other, and that is informed by their personality, whether they are more introverted or extroverted, right? Can inform that. Uh, Narcissistic mothers can seem very nice to the outside world or even kind. I would go as far as to say they are nice, but rarely kind. They are very focused on what the outside world thinks of their family. It's very important to them that people see you in a really good light and see them in a really good light. It is all about appearances. Um, they are also, they tend to live vicariously through their children and their children's accomplishments, right? Um, and can let that be the focus more than the relationship. I think I was about to say that they can be incredibly mean to the point of being abusive. there there's there is this tendency to be mean, disregard you, overlook you, be dismissive, um, the whole devaluation piece that we talk about in romantic relationships absolutely can happen with your mother. There can be on the daily, a devaluation and a dismissal. Then there can be your stereotypical meanness, the cutting comments, the knowing where your vulnerable places are because they created them, right? They created these buttons and they know where to push them. Anything you share with them can and will be used later on to hurt you. They can be outwardly critical, and at the extreme end of their emotional dysregulation, complicated perhaps by substance use, is going to come the verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. So the one time I've seen narcissistic diagnoses utilized is in sexual abuse and incest, probably more sexual abuse, but we are talking about parents, right? Or mothers in this case. So, again, so you can imagine that spectrum. There's a stereotype of narcissistic mothers being highly materialistic and very focused on how they look and being very vain, and that can happen, but it is a stereotype. And so not there can be mothers who do not fit that profile at all. um, so I'm sitting here simultaneously, wanting to be do a little bit more kind of storytelling with this, as opposed to just going through that list of diagnostic criteria and just pulling from the last couple of decades of having these conversations with both men and women. And the men don't have it any easier in this situation. It can be very painful. To have a narcissistic mother, because that's what we're focusing on for now, means that there is a core wound. All mammals and even other types of animals protect their children. If you've had a narcissistic mother, you were not always protected because their needs came first and they were not particularly invested in your safety. Or on the flip side of that, they can be overprotective, but that's usually not the case. But coming back to this, there is a void, there is a wound, there is perhaps a need to do the work of understanding what internalized patterns you have as a result of having this mother experience, right? How has it influenced your self-esteem? How has it influenced your ability to trust? How has it influenced your capacity to be vulnerable? How has it influenced your need to be self-compassionate, right? Anyone who's had a narcissistic mother has a strong internalized critic voice. Has this meant you are more of a perfectionist? Has this meant that you're an overachiever? Has this meant that maybe you underachieve? How has this influenced your life? So if you're curious about that, reach out to me. We'll have a conversation. I would love that. I am now offering, rather than a group program, I am offering individual intensives on narcissistic recovery, as well as the ongoing free monthly transformational workshops. I also have a 5-day course, or you can take as much time as you need or as little time as you need, but it is organized as a 5-day kind of a beginning in your journey of narcissistic recovery, and that's called Finding Your Way, and you can find that at staceysanderson.ca. And I think really just my heart goes out to any of you who've experienced this form of complex trauma. It is different than other forms of relational trauma in a lot of ways. So if this has resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and I will very likely come back and offer up a second video because I'd like to keep them short and not take up too much time. And I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Take good care.